Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. We are so grateful that you could join us this afternoon. And today we are going to be following up on last week's presentation on bliss. We're going to be taking the next step in our journey, as it were. And in order to do so, we must naturally, if we are going to continue on our quest, on our story, we must enter the next chapter, the next part of our tale. And if we comprehend the fundamental three-part aspect of every journey, you have a first act, a second act, and a third act. The second act of any trilogy, of any three-part journey, always is to descend into an abyss. It's the second act is always where everything goes to hell, quite literally. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So strap in, it's going to be quite a ride. We already have people saying hello. Benjamin says hello. Welcome, Benjamin. We are happy to have you. Leah Detonacour says blessings. Welcome, Leah. It's nice to have you back, and it's always a wonderful thing to see a new face returning. That says something, we must be doing something right. Joanna says, yay, hi Attlas, happy to be here. Joanna said, as you know what, she started typing that as soon as we said everything's going to hell. She said, yay! I wouldn't miss it for the world. She's jumping up and down. Azazel says, damn it, I'm already there. See you down there. Azazel is one step ahead of us, as always. Azazel is always one step ahead of us, if not 2 steps, if not 10 steps. And Joanne says, yes, I did. Because let's just say let's just say we were given some inside information. Too bad we can't be given any inside information on the stock market or something like that. Something useful and practical. But we know when Joanne's typing a joke. So take that for what it's worth. By the way, if anybody wishes to pop on and share their tales of woe, their firsthand experiences of their abyss, you're more than welcome to. The link is in the chat. It's also on screen. So you're more than welcome to pop on at any time. There's plenty of room. There's plenty of space for all of you, actually. We don't know how well StreamYard servers will handle it, but if you want to do more than just be a fly on the wall or a voice in the chat, you can be a face on the screen. Or you don't have to be a face. You can just be a voice, right? Tiffany says, good morning/afternoon. So already Tiffany is in the spirit of being on the threshold between the known and the unknown. She's right on the threshold between morning and afternoon. So she's already one step ahead of us today in today's talk. So it's nice to see that everybody is upbeat and chipper and happy to be here. And we're, again, so happy to have you because this is part of our bliss, right? Is to be here for you. And so you being here is a part of that picture. It's a part of that story. And we just so happen to have rewatched The Lord of the Rings not long ago. We didn't watch it on New Year's, as is our normal tradition, but we watched it again recently. So in the month of January, we watched all 3 films. And so to have all of you here, it's like the meeting in Rivendell, when the fellowship is formed, right? It's where we're all going on this journey together, this quest for truth, this quest for knowledge, and this quest for self-knowledge. And each of us, in our own way, for our own reasons, are on this journey. We all have our own purposes, and yet the fellowship has this overall overarching mission, and that mission is to destroy the One Ring, the cause of all of our suffering, the cause of all evil in the world. And that is the ring that represents the wheel of samsara, the incessant repetitive nature of mechanicity and determinism, and how when we get trapped in these loops, these logic loops, or these just repeating habits and repeating behaviors and thought patterns, and it's just like a skipping record, or like any song on repeat that just gets played over and over and over. And what comes to mind is that scene from that Simpsons episode where they've got Tom Jones singing "What's New Pussycat," and one of the characters are ready to blow their brains out because it's just "What's New Pussycat" is on repeat over and over and over again, and that it's like it's essentially hell for that character. So, with all that in mind, let us gather ourselves as that fellowship, and let's embark on the second act in our 3-act journey that began last week, when we decided individually and as a collective to follow our bliss and to dial into the intensity that is required to be and to face the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune in order to abandon all comfort and abandon all security and abandon all that is familiar to us, that we know that defines our world, and we step out into the unknown. And there is no greater fear than the unknown, because we don't know what's waiting for us in the dark. We don't know what's waiting for us over the horizon or around the corner. But we can see all that as a danger, as a looming threat. In other words, we can give in to our fear, we can give in to our anxiety, or we can face our fears and see it as a great adventure. We can look upon that horizon and whatever that horizon brings, and we can say to ourselves, we will be an intrepid explorer beyond that horizon. And of course, the horizon we're speaking of actually lies within, and we will get to all of that. So, from a Joseph Campbell's point of view, in his heroic journey, that's precisely what the hero must do. The hero must cross over the threshold between, as Tiffany pointed out, we must cross the threshold between morning and afternoon, or between the known and the unknown. That's our world, our life, that's safe, that's comfortable, that we all have some level of nesting instinct, like all mammals do, and we've created a space that in which we feel secure. And to one degree or another, that space reflects, it's a projection of our inner psychology. So we might have surrounded us with artwork or posters or paraphernalia of many different kinds. We might have surrounded ourselves with artifacts that we have collected on our journeys. Who knows? I mean, look around your room, your space, and you decide for yourself how it is a reflection of your personality, of your psychology, of your history, of your life up until this point. And that you have arranged that space for a reason. And you have arranged that space to maximize your feeling of comfort, of security, of, that this is my space, or if you have a man cave or whatever the case may be. And we must recognize that we do the same thing in our own psychology, that the space that we inhabit is a projection and a reflection of our psychology, but the fact that we have arranged our space to be as comfortable and as secure and as inviting to us as it is, it's our nest. But that nesting instinct is a reflection of the internal psychological nest that we've created for ourselves. There are various psychological songs that we sing ourselves, or rather, our mind, our egos sing to us, and they are lullabies. They lull our consciousness to sleep. They lull the adventurous spirit within us to sleep in exchange for that which is familiar, in exchange for that which is comfortable, that which is secure, that which we know. There's an expression that says, I'd rather be with the devil I know than the devil I don't. And while it's a very clever expression, you can see how insidious it is, because it precisely says that, okay, well, I'm living with my demons, but at least I know them. I know how they behave. I can manage them. So I'm going to stick here with the devil I know, because out there somewhere across the horizon, who knows what I'm going to encounter. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? But here, everything makes sense. Everything I've got some familiarity. I've got some I know what I'm dealing with, right? But it is precisely that space of comfort and security, that solid ground, that foundation that we have built for ourselves, which is a foundation built on sand. No matter what we tell ourselves and how good it feels and everything else, it is just like any other mammal making a nest to secure itself from the outside world. All right, just think of a timid squirrel, all right, and how frazzled they are, and how, like, they're always like on edge. um, we must break free of that. And to break free of that doesn't necessarily mean you have to upend and move. It doesn't mean you have to quit your job. It doesn't mean you have to leave your marriage. Because all of those types of actions, for many people who, for example, go through a midlife crisis, many will do rash, radical, life-altering changes, destroy their marriage, their family, their job, their business, everything, because they're undergoing this radical psychological shift that they can't make sense out of. So what do? They upend everything out there. But remember, the horizon that we seek is in here, and the comfort and security that we must abandon is in here. And we must cross the threshold of that which we think we know and become an intrepid explorer of the unknown. One of the first things that happens to us when we embark on such a quest is we invariably meet what's known as the guardian of the threshold. Now, the guardian of the threshold is an archetype. It's a character which guards the unknown, and usually is a force that's telling the hero to turn back. In your life, if you are following your bliss, then at some point in your life, and perhaps many points along your journey as you've been going around the AUM of Life, with each revolution, as you prepare to make another descent into the abyss, you are met with opposition. And she said, Tiffany says, "Oh, yeah." She says, "Talk about the guardian of the threshold. I'm currently exploring this." Well, you can't descend into the abyss without encountering a guardian that's going to tell you to turn back. And for most of us, that guardian is literally our guardian, our parent, a parent, or both parents. If we have, or some family member or somebody else in our life who purports to love us and cares for us and wants what's best for us. And these individuals, these very well-meaning, well-intentioned individuals, are often the ones who give us all the reasons why we should not embark on this dangerous, unknown, unknowable side journey. So if, for example, well, in our case, it is 99% of the time it's been a family member. In your case, it might be different. But generally speaking, the guardian of the threshold is someone who's sort of an authority figure, and someone who at some point in your life you may have even looked up to or turned to for advice on a regular basis, as we do as children growing up with parents. Our parents are the ones that look after us and so on and so forth, and they're authority figures in our life. Obviously, they're the first authority figures in our life. But this guardian is there looking after your person, and they see you as a person, and they are going to advise you on that basis. The threshold that you are crossing is a you are crossing into a realm of the magical, the mystical, the esoteric. It is not a place for normies, for muggles, if we want to use that terminology. Heroes are, by definition, in mythology and in every other sense, heroes are strange. They are the outsiders. Going back to Lord of the Rings, Bilbo is an absolute oddity and a complete enigma to the rest of the hobbits. He goes away and he has his adventure in the Hobbit, right? In the Misty Mountains, etc., the Lonely Mountain with Smaug the dragon, everything else. He returns with this ring that nobody knows about, but he returns with all this wealth and all of this, and he's a complete and total utter enigma to everybody else in the village. And the hero is always has to be that way. He's an outsider. And those that guard the threshold are not so much guarding what's on the other side, because they have no real knowledge of it. They're guarding the person from what they fear. And they're guarding the individual, your person, from making what they see as a rash and foolish decision and a reckless choice, because they're seeing things. For them, comfort and security and worldly success and the protection of your person is paramount, because that's what's paramount to them. As a normie, as a muggle, they don't know anything else. To them, it's worldly success, it's worldly comfort, it's worldly security. That's what matters. And anyone who's on a genuine spiritual path of awakening and self-realization very quickly finds himself alone. And they discover that the family they grew up in, or the circle of friends that they have, or the acquaintances at work, and so on and so forth, if you attempt to open up to these people and reveal to them your dreams and your aspirations, they immediately move to shut them down, to shut those doors, or they don't want to hear it, right? So in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker wants to go off and join the rebellion, but his Uncle Owen is dead set against it. His Uncle Owen forbids it. Says, no, I need you here for the harvest, and so on. What he really knows is that he doesn't want him, going off and getting into all kinds of trouble like his father. His Uncle Owen knows that history, but has never revealed it to Luke. So in that particular case, the guardian of the threshold sometimes can know something about the other side, but it's always bad. They always only know the bad, that which is to be feared, that which is to be avoided. And that's Uncle Owen in Star Wars, the original 1977 film. And, well, circumstances, under whatever circumstances, we end up crossing that threshold. In the case of, Luke Skywalker, it's, the farm gets raided by stormtroopers, and Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru are vaporized. So he says, there's nothing left for me here now. There's no turning back. My comfort and security has been destroyed. Right? I have no choice but to move forward. I have no choice but to cross into the threshold. But of course, Luke doesn't do this entirely alone, because there is another figure that appears either before to facilitate, or afterwards, soon after we cross over the threshold into the unknown. And that is the wise man, the mentor, the teacher, the guide. This individual, this aspect can take on many, many forms in literature, in mythology, in storytelling of all kinds. And such an individual might appear in our lives as a kind of guide or a teacher outside of us. But for us, because we've always seen mythology and storytelling allegorically, the guide, the teacher, is always an aspect of our higher self, if not our higher self. So they are a source of wisdom. They are a source of, again, guidance. And they have knowledge of the other side because they've gone down into the abyss and they've returned. They have had their heroic journey. And they agree to go with you on your heroic journey. But the esoteric truth of this is that the two journeys are one. They're going on another round. And it just so happens that we are the vessel, the vehicle for the next descent that they need to go on. That's from our experiential point of view. But again, we may encounter somebody outside of us who has wisdom and guidance to offer as we make our descent the descent into the unknown, and where we have to face something that is mysterious to us, it's unknown to us. And that element, that phenomenon that we face is always inside of us. And any circumstance that we find ourselves in, where things essentially go to hell, our life implodes, things just fall apart or seemingly fall apart, or we just find ourselves in ever increasingly difficult situations, or we find ourselves in a kind of in a desert where everything stops, all motion ceases, all forward momentum. It's like that scene in Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, with Russell Crowe, when they're out in the open ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, and the wind just stops. And the Pacific Ocean becomes like a mirror. The ocean is so calm and so still, it is unbelievable. And they're just on this patch of ocean with no wind, and they can get nowhere. And they're just baking under this incessant sun, not a cloud in the sky. Their food is running low. Their water is, all their provisions are running low, and they can't go anywhere because they're a sailing ship, and they require wind to be able to get anywhere. And we've all had some experience of that. It's its own unique kind of hell. We have done a live stream about it in the past called Lost in the Desert. And we did another one called Waiting in the Dark, where we just get stuck. And there are so many different examples, and there are so many different like allegories that exist that reflect the unique kind of hell that getting stuck is. So you have cartoon characters, for example, getting stuck in quick drying cement. And now they're stuck in quick drying cement, and they can't get anywhere, but they're exposed to the elements, and they're exposed to whatever circumstances come their way. There are many, many, many different examples and different circumstances which can constitute a personal hell and a descent into hell. And here Stuart is going to offer some insight from his perspective. He says, order and chaos, Batman and the Joker. And in this friction, the battle is generated, at odds with each other, yet dependent on each other. A divine tragicomedy writ large through our families and friends. In struggles with muggles, one becomes one. A dance of divinity flowing through infinity. I give thanks to those who are here to hear, whether near or far, together we raise the bar. Thanks for that, Stuart. The use of Batman and the Joker as an archetype is an interesting one, because the Joker is there to test Batman. That's really what he's there for. And he really is the real, true alter ego of Batman. It's not Bruce Wayne. So Batman and the Joker are two aspects of one psychology. Bruce Wayne is just the superficial vessel. And the Dark Knight descends every evening, every night, he descends into the abyss to fight the denizens in Gotham. And the Joker, one of the interesting things about the Joker is that the archetype of the Joker is that he's a trickster. He's the fool, but the fool who always speaks the truth. And he speaks the truth through satire and ridicule and that which is ludicrous, that which is surreal. But the Joker speaks the truth. And it's the truth that only chaos reveals. And he even expresses this, even though Heath Ledger's Joker was not true to the comics, but he was true to the archetype of what he was playing, and he was playing it from the perspective of a classically trained actor. And he reveals the nature of his character, or the nature of the archetype, when he speaks to Harvey Dent, now Two-Face, in the hospital. And he says, and of all the muggles, of all the normies, he says, they're the schemers, right? And I'm just here to, show them just how pathetic they are and turn their little worlds upside down. That's Loki. That's every trickster god that throws a monkey wrench in the works and causes the heroes and the heroines to stumble and fall through a series of a comedy of errors, but in the end everything works out and everybody is a little bit wiser for having stumbled and bumbled through this slapstick comedy of errors. The character of the fool, or the Joker, comes from the commedia dell'arte, the character of Arlecchino. That's where we get the term slapstick from. And Arlecchino was a clown, but obviously not a clown from the modern Western perspective, but he was a harlequin. That's where the word harlequin comes from, is Arlecchino. And why, when they decided to give Joker a female companion, she was named Harley Quinn, because the Joker is named after Arlecchino, and Arlecchino had this stick on stage. The Commedia dell'arte was basically a Italian Renaissance traveling troupe of comedians, and they played these archetypal roles like Il Dottore and Antonio and Arlecchino, and they all had their names and they all had their archetypal personalities and whatnot. And it was the grandfather of the sitcom. The modern day sitcom is based on the Commedia dell'arte. And so Batman, who's so serious, right? One of the things that he has to, and he's so adamant about control because he's ruled by fear. And that's why he uses fear against his enemies, because it's just like there's a lot that's revealed in the films when Alfred asks Bruce Wayne, "Why bats, Mr. Wayne?" And he says, "Because bats frighten me, and it's time that my enemies know my dread." And so the whole projection and the whole use of one's own fear against that which one fears, and it's this very, very kind of messed up sort of psychology going on when one really starts digging into it. But that's the nature of the Dark Knight. That's why he is the Dark Knight. And it's only fitting that the Dark Knight has the most psychotic adversary in just about all of comic books, in the figure of the Joker. But the Joker is a comedian. The Joker is Arlecchino. He is the one who's just there messing up the works and causing chaos that Batman has to negotiate and bumble and fumble his way through, and to restore order to Gotham, which is his own psychology. The word abyss comes from the Greek. It would help if we, there we go. The word abyss comes from the Greek, and it's two words. Is it bubos, babos, something like that, and ababos, right? So it basically means bottomless. So last week, when we were talking about bliss, we were talking about this hole, within us. And that bliss is what comes out of this hole, and through this hole within us comes out into the world. And so long as we can continually return to the wellspring within us and draw from that wellspring into our vessel and be a vessel and carry what we are drawing from that well and distribute it and give it to the world, then we are living our bliss, because we're living our purpose. And that hole is continually being filled from within. And we are fulfilling our purpose, our duty as a vessel. We're going to see if we can pull this off in some meaningful way. There's an attempt at an old school jug, right? An old school vessel. So this vessel is empty, and we go to the well, we go to the spring, and we fill it up. And then we pour it forth, right? That's what a vessel is for. But the wellspring is bottomless, is it not? The source that we're drawing from, it's always there. There is an interesting connection here between bliss and abyss. The fact that they sound a little bit similar, we shouldn't read too much into that, because etymologically there is no connection between them. Abyss comes from the ancient Greek and Latin, and bliss comes from the Germanic. So etymologically, there's no connection between the two words. But is it coincidence? The source of our bliss is bottomless. And the definition of abyss is that bottomless pit. This is a clue why following your bliss inevitably and must take you into the abyss. And the clue is as follows. We all have a certain access. We have access to a certain amount of our source, right? We have certain bandwidth, if you will. But we are not completely awake and self-realized. We are not that source incarnate. So in this pit that we have to descend into, I'm going to draw this over here. As we descend down, and we descend, even if we go into a downward spiral, right? But we're descending floors and floors and floors of this dungeon, of this labyrinth. We're going to encounter conflicts and tests and trials on our way down until we eventually meet the big boss, right? The boss of this level, of this dungeon or this video game, or whatever, however you want to, the Medusa at the center of the labyrinth. And this journey, this quest, from the standpoint of Star Wars, they have to go and it's the Death Star. That's the allegorical or symbolic labyrinth. In Lord of the Rings, it's Mordor. Let's see if we can pull off an all-seeing eye there. And they have to go into Mordor and into the heart of Mount Doom. And there's always some great evil lurking at the bottom of that pit, of that bottomless pit. In the abyss, we have to face and confront some evil. Because this evil, and the Hobbit, of course. In the Hobbit, it's the Lonely Mountain, and it's Smog. Right? And Smog guards a whole bunch of treasure and the Arkenstone. But the boss, the Eye of Sauron, Darth Vader, or the Empire, they hold some treasure and they hold some key that the hero needs to recover. And they can only do that by facing the master of the abyss, the one who's at the heart of the abyss. I'm the one who's causing and bringing suffering to the realm. This is every fairy tale, right? This is why we can talk about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, because it's every fairy tale, it's every mythology, it's 6,500 stories from folklore and mythology and literature and scripture from all over the world. Joseph Campbell's study was absolutely exhaustive. He left nothing out. But esoterically, practically, the treasure that we need to recover includes because part of the pile of treasure guarded by this boss is some percentage of our consciousness. And consciousness is how we connect with our source. It's the bandwidth. It's the medium. Here we talked about being a vessel and drawing on the spring. But we have to comprehend that we are not the only vessel. We are the mortal vessel. But our monad is the divine vessel. And that the spring that we're drawing on is the Logos, is the Christ, the source. And when we say source, it's even the Christ is descending from the source, which is the first Logos. The absolute is the source. The Christ is that which descends. So the Christ is the flow of the spring. It's not even the source of the spring. It's what comes up out of the spring. But that is collected in our monad. That's our divine vessel. We are immortal. We carry this and we take it and we pour it forth. We are a servant. We are the one who is sent to fetch water. But our vessel, the true hero, is our monad, our innermost. And our consciousness that, here, move this over here. The consciousness belongs to the monad. So as we go into the abyss and face what needs to be faced in the abyss, and we defeat and conquer that within us which must be conquered, we liberate consciousness, which is the medium which adds potentiality, that adds capacity and capability to our divine vessel and our ability to carry and pour forth from our divine vessel. We're going to just take a quick break for a moment here because we have some comments that we don't want to go too far ahead without addressing. Stuart says, thank you, Attlas, for the Batman Joker analysis. You nailed the reasons I use that example in order for order and chaos. There is a very interesting dialogue with Joker and Harvey Dent where he points out that the masses love plans even when the plan is destructive. They will cling to the known even with an obvious negative outcome. The monad directly threatens the status quo. It is high time to step towards sovereignty of self, and your book in this gathering is aiding that purpose. Thank you. You're welcome, Stuart. Azazel says, going on the downward spiral can sometimes be a conscious decision. It's like a game, too, when the player needs to increase the difficulty a bit. And he follows that up and says, and sometimes we're just a disappointment. Let's back up and address this first. Going on the downward spiral can sometimes be a conscious decision. It's always a conscious decision on some level. We know what you mean, but at the same time, you don't want to invent a downward spiral. So when you say it's a conscious decision, we're always presented with a choice, and whether, I suppose, consciously or unconsciously, we make the choice that sends us down the downward spiral. At some point, we agree or we choose to enter into that path that takes us down into the abyss. As for being a disappointment, well, no one is perfect. And our innermost being is nothing if not patient. And our Divine Mother is nothing if not patient. So all of us have failed. All of us have stumbled along the path. And it is unrealistic, and it is a trap of ego to believe that we're never going to make mistakes and that we're never going to fall. It is unrealistic. It is completely unrealistic. I don't know anyone who's ever played any game where they've completed the game on their first try, first run through, without a single death, without a single mess up, failing a level or whatever the case may be, right? Games are designed to be difficult. They're designed to be challenging, and life is difficult. Life is challenging, and we're talking about going into the abyss. We're talking about going and facing the most challenging aspects of our life at any given point in time. So being a disappointment, you know what's more of a disappointment? When we don't answer the call. When we receive the call to adventure and we don't answer it, and we choose comfort and security. We choose to stay at home in our nest. We don't embark on the adventure. That's when we're a disappointment. Our innermost being, our Divine Mother, can hardly fault us for trying and failing, but they can fault us for not trying. Failure by omission, failure by not being. I mean, that's the real disappointment. Because at least if we're going on the adventure, at least they have the chance of being our guide, right? Just like in the hero's journey. But if we give in to the guardian of the threshold and we decide to stay at home, we never meet our Obi-Wan Kenobi, our Yoda. right? We never meet our Ramirez, if you want to use Highlander as an example, right? We never meet our mentor. We never meet our guide if we don't embark on our journey. If we stay at home, we're stuck with Uncle Owen and Aunt Peru or Maru. Can't remember. It's been too long since we watched that movie. Joanne asks, and so this brings us into Joanne's question here. What relationship does the soul have to the monad? Okay, so on the tree of life, we have our monad, which is we have our Atman, our Buddhi, and our Antipareth. This is the human soul. This is the monad. So the monad is triunity. We have our Atman, our being. Okay, we have our consciousness. This is our divine soul. Our human soul is in Tipareth. All this is the sixth dimension, by the way. So the relationship between our soul and our monad is that our soul is 1/3 of our monad, our divine vehicle, our divine vessel. That's the relationship. But if you want to think, if you're asking what is the relationship from the standpoint of the mortal vessel, the human being has an awakened, with an awakened consciousness, has developed their solar causal body. That's another word for human soul, is the causal body. When we develop our solar causal body, we develop our human soul. That is when we awaken, because that is when we activate this essential component of the triunity of being, consciousness, and soul. So to have awakened consciousness, we have to have that direct connection active at all times. And that is when we become a true vessel and vehicle of our higher self. That's when we are awake and truly conscious. To perhaps it's hang on a second. We go here and quickly we can pull this up. Where is it? This. Let's use this. It's faster. So here, this is what was it? Figure something or other, figure 39 in our book, Joanne. And this is what we just drew, is reflected right here. The true self, the monad. To the innermost being, the divine soul, the human soul. This is our consciousness. And so Tipareth, then, this Sephiroth, is what links us and connects us between the mortal being and the true self. And the human soul is the bridge that's connecting our higher self with our lower self. We hope that answers your question. If not, send us a follow-up question and we'll try to expand upon it and answer what we haven't answered yet. Stuart says, haha, a light bulb on moment. A light bulb on moment. English schools in Great Britain teach us relentlessly the high story of William the Conqueror. The significance is now apparent. Okay. Leah de Contour. I always want to pronounce this de Contour. I know it's de Tonacour. Perfectly imperfect, she says. And Joanne says, yes, that was very helpful. Thank you. Okay. All right. If we're good, then let's move on. Let's continue, because where were we? We were down in hell, and we were looking at the relationship between bottomless, the bottomless source, the infinite source, and the bottomless pit, and how the boss is guarding this treasure at the bottomless pit, and that treasure directly connects us to the source, because that consciousness belongs to our monad, our divine vessel, and the more consciousness we have, the more we are able to draw from the source. So there is this, so the deeper you are in the abyss, it's the closer you are to a profound treasure of consciousness. The deeper you are in the abyss, the closer you are to your bliss. Because you are closer to your goal of why you descended into the abyss in the first place, of why you went, why the hero goes on his journey, why Perseus and Theseus enter the labyrinth. Because there is some great treasure that's being guarded by the demon at the heart, in the heart of the labyrinth. Stuart says, sometimes it appears to me that we stand up, accept the journey, and then tie our shoelaces together and fall flat on our face. We can get up and go again and again and again. We all have peaks and troughs in form, yet attitude can always be maintained with focus and discipline. Eventually, we just take our shoes off and bare the soles and run free. At some point, it seems to me that failing in failure no longer hurts as we become ever more childlike and bounce. The fixed mind of ego is, and I'm sure he's going to continue that because you got cut off. Because there's, Stuart, there's only so much you can type in a chat, right? There's a cutoff that StreamYards has a cutoff. I don't know what that cutoff is because I never type any chats, right? I'm here doing the show. So, and Stuart says it rigid and hurts. So the fixed mind of ego is rigid and hurts. Okay. Mugaboo says, in my experience, the descent is mostly a conscious decision. Deep down, we know that the pearl of priceless value can be found in those depths. However, he says, it is easier to go down a mountain than to climb a mountain. So this is an interesting aspect of what we're talking about here, because when we look at this from the perspective of the AUM of Life, from the spiral pattern, the spiral shape of descent and ascent, Mugaboo is absolutely right. It's easier to go down than it is to come back up, and the reason why that is because this upward arc, first we have to face and conquer the boss, right? In the bottommost level of our abyss. It's like the big boss of the dungeon. But facing it and overcoming it and conquering it, comprehending it is one thing. But returning, right? That's not always so easy, because look at the Look at Luke Skywalker when he defeats Darth Vader, and he's got him beat. He's beaten Darth Vader. And the Emperor starts clapping with glee, you know. He's like, good, 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 good. Your hate has made you powerful. Now strike your father down and take his place at my side. And Luke realizes, and he looks at his robotic hand with the black leather glove, and he realizes that the hand that he just lopped off his father and he looks at his own hand and the symbolism of that and the realization of what is happening. He's seemingly defeated a villain, but he's not out of the woods. In fact, he's never been closer to danger. He's never been closer to actually going deeper into the abyss and falling into a downward spiral that he can't get out of. There's a crossroads here. There's this. It's not quite as simple as going down, facing your demons, facing a challenge, overcoming it, and then it's all hunky dory, and you come back to the real world. There is a test, and the hero must not only defeat the demon, but in the act of recovering the treasure, recovering the value, recovering the artifact, whatever it is, allegorically, but it's the power, the strength that one gains in that process. Immediately the hero is tested to see if they're worthy of it. The other version of this is that if the hero expends themselves and overreach their limits in order to defeat their adversary, in order to fulfill their mission, that the reason why they descended into the abyss, we can be left with no strength, with no energy to make this return journey. That's the case with Frodo and Sam after the ring is destroyed. So in that particular case, Gandalf comes with the eagles to save them at the end of the film, because Frodo and Sam, their life is, at some point along their journey into Mordor, they both accept that, I don't think we're going home. I don't think we're getting out of this alive. I think when we signed up for this trip, we might have been naive, believing that, but I don't think Frodo was ever naive. I think that Frodo always knew it was a one-way trip. But there's another aspect of that return that makes it very difficult. And that is, even if you do make it back up here, you do make it back home. This is shown very beautifully in Lord of the Rings, when Frodo says, how do you go back and start living the way you used to live before, when some wounds are just, they never heal, they just cut too deep, and some things that you've been through, you can't erase that. You can't go back. You can't go backwards, in other words. He realizes that when he left Hobbiton, when he left the Shire, he was completely naive. And everything that he went through, him and Sam and everything else, when he comes back from that, he can't go home. He goes home just long enough to be able to finish writing the book. But that's the allegory that's going on in Lord of the Rings, is is multidimensional, because the story of Lord of the Rings and the destruction of the ring, at the end of the film, Frodo ascends, right? Frodo gets off the wheel of samsara. Frodo goes into the west with the elves and Gandalf and Bilbo. Sam stays behind because Sam was the mortal vessel. Sam represents the physical body. He's Hanuman, and Frodo is Rama. Frodo represents the innermost being. Because Frodo is the hero of the story of the Lord of the Rings, and Sam is the physical body that gets Frodo to Mordor. But the ring, the ego, is Frodo's to bear. That's the innermost being's burden. The ego belongs to the being, and Sam has to put up with it. He has to deal with it. He has to face the reality of it, and he's got to. And that's why Sam is the mortal enemy of Gollum, because Gollum is the physical embodiment of the ring. Well, that's, you know, the broad strokes, and if you want to say it's like the intellectual analysis. But we want to shift away, and we want to get into a space more in relation to the abyss, more like where we were last week talking about bliss, because we want this to be practical and meaningful. And so in the same way that last week we were talking about some of the dangers when following your bliss, and some of the traps that we can fall into, and some of the things that are not bliss, that pretend to be bliss, or we can convince ourselves that we are following our bliss, but meanwhile we're only following a craving or just happiness, or we're it's easy to be deceived by ego, particularly. So do the same rules apply when it comes to exploring our abyss? And why do we say we have to explore our abyss? Isn't it clear what it is and what we need to do? And no, it's not. Just as it's not clear that what bliss is at any given time for any particular person. Because if it was clear, everybody would be following their bliss, but they're not. And so many people think they are, and they're not. And so many people want to be following their bliss, but they don't know what it is. They haven't discovered it. They don't know how to find it within themselves. So if that's true of bliss, what does that say of the abyss? And is it possible that the abyss, that if what you're looking for is your bliss, and you don't know what that is, and you don't know how to follow it, is it possible that the abyss will reveal it to you? Azazel says, they should have used the eagle cab earlier on. Yes, that's a well-known meme about the eagle grabbing the ring and just flying over the mountain and dropping it in. Tiffany says, I've had to integrate an 80-20 rule for myself when it comes to dealing with shadows or spiritual enlightenment. And she says, I noticed that whichever one I'm working with, I'm creating more experiences of it. Because we cannot we cannot know what we do not face. We cannot know what we do not see. We cannot know what we do not experience. So it's impossible to do shadow work. It's impossible to go on a revolution of AUM unless you face the demon. And you can only face the demon if the demon shows itself. So that is the point of the law of attraction. We don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. And we attract what our divine mother knows we have to see. So the circumstances arise such that our demons get triggered, our egos get triggered, so they come to the surface. And then we experience the suffering that they cause us and others in the exchange, whatever that is. And then usually it goes back down into hell. But then it's our opportunity to go and follow it down into the depths, into the dungeons, and seek it out within our own subconscious mind. And that's where the exploration comes in. We have to explore ourselves, our own subconscious mind, our own thought processes and emotional processes and physical processes, and recognize how it is that this mechanical entity, this ego, functions within us and causes us suffering. What triggers it? How does it react? And in what centers does it utilize? Does it take control of us? So how does it possess us? In our mind, in our heart, in our body, in our motor instinct. So our motor instinctive sexual center, which center is it functioning in? Our mental center, emotional center. And we can meditate upon what we observe. And it's in the meditation and analysis and exploration in meditation that we can arrive at a comprehension and see that ego in the light of consciousness and comprehend its ways and comprehend how it causes us and others suffering. Stuart says, this talk has reminded me that God always gives us what we need when we are on the path, just as Gandalf sent eagles for Frodo and Sam. That's true. We are never left wanting. However we may feel, and whatever we may believe we are lacking in any given moment, that's just a belief. That's just based on our own desires, our own desire for things to be easier. Again, our desire for comfort and security, our desire for entitlements. So we can very easily fall into the, oh, I'm forsaken, right? Even Jesus fell into that on the cross where he says, oh God, why have you forsaken me? Right? So it's a very natural human sort of response when we are in the real depths of despair, when we're really in the pit of hell, as far down as we can go in this mortal form. And it's a natural thing to want to cry out and ask that question. But of course, as we explained, abyss meaning bottomless, and our bliss coming from that infinite source, that's the trick, is knowing that the closer you are to the bottom of that bottomless pit, the closer you are to the source of your bliss. The Black Lodge ultimately works for the White Lodge. The game is here to test and to challenge and to develop us. It's like when you're lifting weights and you're lifting to failure and you're trying to squeeze out one more repetition. And it's agony, it's hell, it's suffering to try to squeeze out your muscles are burning, you're sweating and everything else. And it's like your muscles just want to give up and collapse but but you just with all of your willpower and all of your force, you push through it, and you get that one last good solid rep in. You squeeze it out. And that last rep done that way is what's going to create this whole world of stimulus for your muscle to grow. It's very much like that when we're talking about exploring your abyss and facing these difficult, challenging people and circumstances and all of that around you that's drawing up and drawing forth from within you and putting you into this psychological hell, because all these egos are being stimulated and are being caused to react. And it can be very overwhelming. It can be very tiring, exhausting, of course. That's why our background is this knight, is this warrior collapsed, right? As he's facing the dragon, and the dragon's hot on his heels, and he's collapsed. He's about ready to give up. Stuart also says bliss comes from seeking, knowing, and faithfulness, isn't it? He says bliss to me is fulfillment in devotion. Well, you'll just have to watch last week's live stream. Tiffany says, so 20% shedding of behaviors and low resonating experiences. 80% focus and attention exploring this sovereign divinity. It's within that 20% where I see an uptick of tests, so to speak, approaches me. Okay. For our part, we're not resonating with the 80-20 rule. Whatever this 80-20 rule that you're describing here, the 80-20 doesn't resonate with us, because this is not, I don't know, this type of statistical mathematical ratio thing. It's, for us, it feels too intellectual and too structured for it to be meaningful. It's, to us. If it's meaningful to you, by all means, but that's not our experience of it, right? Our experience of hell, when we're in hell, we can be in hell 100%. The recognition is to be to be observant of that, and to be in a place beyond the Tao, is to recognize that all of that is in service of our higher self. So when we talk about the Tao, we talk about the yin and the yang, right? The black and the white, the light and the dark. And to be in all one or all the other, it doesn't matter, when really we're always in balance with both, and we're always beyond both, because love is severity and mercy in balanced measure, applied unconditionally with infinite wisdom. So the 80-20, we don't know where you got that from. We don't know why you chose it or why it seems to be meaningful to you. It doesn't resonate with us. So there is always divinity, even in hell, because even in the abyss, because we were sent there to cultivate and to develop and to grow precisely that aspect of ourselves. Without an adversary, there is no way to develop. There's no way to get better. If you have no opponent, if you have no obstacle, there's no way to get better. That's not to say that our egos are our friends. They're not. They're our adversary. And we've said this many times, when you're playing chess with someone, your opponent on the other side of the table is your adversary. They're not your enemy. They're just your adversary. But on the board, the pieces that they move are ruthless. They're heartless. They're soulless. And so must you be on the board, the way you move your pieces on the board. There's no point in being naive. There's no point in being kind to the pawns and the knights and the bishops and the queen of your opponent. You can't afford to be kind. You can't afford to be courteous. You can be courteous to your opponent. You can be kind and courteous and polite to the person sitting across the table from you. But on the board, you must be ruthless. You must be practical. And it's when you live consciously and holistically in a comprehensive way, there is no percentages thing coming in, because I never am not the mortal vessel, even when I'm speaking to you in complete service of Attlas. There's never this meter or this percentage that's slipping this way or that way. In the same way that here and now in this moment, the demon of fear that we live with is here also, right? Don't think that he's not trying to weasel his way into this discussion somehow. You can't experience it, you can't see it, but we constantly have to, we are constantly have to consciously and physically and directly and purposefully relax. Because every time we speak as Attlas, the demon is clenching up muscles and tensing up ligaments and muscles in our body, because its nature is fear. And it's an ego, it's a demon. It does not want us to be able to communicate as Attlas. This is a constant battle that goes on. This is something that we live with. This is something that this is the burden that we took upon ourselves. It's always there. It's always present. And we always have to be vigilant and in control and in command of that aspect of our mechanical nature. But this comes with great practice, and it comes many, many times going down into hell and going down into the abyss and facing this demon directly. And but we are whole and one. There is no separation and percentages of this and that and the other thing. We can't, we don't experience it that way. Let's put it that way. And we cannot conceptualize it that way. And we don't know how useful it is to conceptualize it that way. And it's only because our experience of it does not reflect that in any way, shape, or form. We were on a live stream, or not a live stream, a podcast. We were recording a podcast that we were invited upon. That the interviewer asked us, "What's it like, to be your, like, how does it work? Like, you, and there's you, the mortal self, and then you, the higher self. Like, what is it? Is it like having two personalities, or like?" She wanted to know what it was like. And we told her, well, you already know what it's like. If you've ever been inspired, if you've ever cried tears of joy, been moved to tears by some beautiful piece of music, or you've ever done something that afterwards you looked at and went, wow, how the hell did I do that? That was incredible. Yet in the moment that you were doing it, you weren't being possessed by anything, because the conversation that we were having led to this place, because we were talking about channeling and channelers, and why channeling is a spiritual crime. Because when you're channeling, or you're, quote, automatic writing or something is physically taking control of you, and you're losing volition as another entity possesses you in order to. But it's not like that. Being awake and one with your higher self is never like that. Your higher self will never possess you, because your higher self will never violate the law of free will. because this kind of mathematics, percentages, do not apply in the metaphysical space. It's 100% you and 100% your higher self together. That makes 100% you. 100% plus 100%, 100%. You want to think about it as 200%, fine, but it's never 20%, 80%, 30%, 70%. It's not like that. Not like that at all. Your experience of it is much more subtle and much more sublime than that. It's not mechanical or in any way, shape, or form like that. And if you follow your bliss, if there's something that you do that's divinely inspired that you do on a regular basis, observe yourself doing it. And you know it's wild. And something is moving through you while you're doing it. Right? You can put a percentage to it if you'd like. If it's valuable to you, then do so. But from our perspective and from our experience, we just simply do not we just do not experience it that way, and therefore it doesn't resonate with us. It also doesn't, when we talk about intensity and devotion and so on, and talk about like letting go of comfort and security. Meditate on these concepts, and when you consider this 80-20% ratio, and ask yourself, does the hero leave 80% of themselves behind? Do they only dip 20% into the dungeon? Or they only go down 20% into the abyss, but they stay 80% in comfort and security? We're not saying this to berate you or belittle you in any way. We're just questioning the value of approaching things from that point of view, from that perspective. Jennifer says, hi there, have to join late today. Well, we're happy to have you, Jennifer. Welcome. Stuart says, God shakes hands with the devil. Sorry, is that what it says? Yeah, God shakes hands with the devil. This, to me, is the epitome of the game's mechanism of AUM. Okay, we'll buy that. We'll take that. Joanne says, my goodness, this is such a good teaching, so deep and so thorough. Thank you. You're welcome, Joanne. You're welcome. Tiffany's coming back, and she's gonna explain. She's gonna try to explain to us her 80-20 ratio. The 80-20 ratio is merely a part of my journey. I had to apply this for myself. Yes. Well, there you go. If it works for you, it works for you, and we're not here to question that. If that's helping you in some way contextualize what you're going through, then great. Then continue to do so. But if you find yourself being called or being plunged into the abyss, and you find yourself, that 80-20 being stretched, don't attach yourself to it. Don't identify with that 80-20. And don't attach yourself to it, because there will be a time when you are tested, and the tests that you are facing are going to challenge that particular ratio. And if you stick dogmatically to that in some way, without allowing yourself, surrendering to the moment, and allowing yourself to stretch yourself, to allow yourself to be tested beyond what at the moment you have set in kind of an arbitrary limit, then you may be robbing yourself of a tremendous potential that you have, but that this arbitrary limit prevents you from knowing. prevents you from exploring and discovering. Stuart says, I concur. Hell is engulfing. The journey is engulfing as it's devotional. Yet divine love is also engulfing and embracing. Because the two things are one and the same. Severity and mercy. Right? But yeah, it's a holistic experience. It's a all-encompassing experience. If we immerse ourselves in the moment, then there's nothing left on the table. We give all of ourselves to the moment, whatever that moment entails. So it could be a moment of pure hell, or it could be a moment of pure bliss. And the line that separates the two is a hairline. And because, as we're explaining, because the two are related. The two are two sides of the same coin. But giving oneself to the moment completely and fully and entirely, that's devotion. And if you devote yourself to your Divine Mother, you will never, ever be without her embrace. And if you dedicate yourself to your path, to your bliss, then yeah, you will find yourself being engulfed in flames. Because the path of the Bodhisattva, the path of one on the razor's edge, the path of one who has devoted themselves to their innermost, to their higher self, that's an all-encompassing proposition. It doesn't mean that, despite the intensity that comes with it, doesn't mean that you do not have moments of reprieve, that you don't have moments of calm, of rest, of recovery. Of course, because you have, everything comes in waves, and there's always, just like sound waves are waves of intense compressed air followed by periods of relative calm. That's what frequency and vibration is all about. So you have these waves of compressed, stressful, impactful, all-encompassing, waves hitting you, but then it's the calm before the storm and the calm after the storm. Azazel says, yep, they help us down there too. He's referring to our higher self, our innermost, and our Divine Mother. And he says, sometimes, like, man, what did you do this time? He says, so it's all a brotherhood. Like when you ask a friend to help you clear out a dungeon. Okay, so Azazel, there's some stories lurking in these comments. We will leave it at that. Tiffany says, okay, so you speak of vigilance of the demon who doesn't wish to have Attlas speak. That demon needs its stage, but it can't be all the time, as Attlas wouldn't have a voice. Same for me. Divinity needs a stage in my life to be a level I've not yet mastered. So that 80-20 allows me to give the stage to both. At this point, I've allowed those distortions to run my life. My desire is to embed the knowing of divinity in my life, where I don't have to work so hard to keep hold of it or allow. I've had to for now until I see a solid shift within me. And she says, when I'm in the abyss, I'm there, fully present. I call it having tea with Medusa. Okay. So, okay, like like I said, Tiffany, we don't want to dwell on this, and we don't want to challenge you or confront you with how this is how you understand and how you work with where you are on your journey. Then that's fine. That's, we're not going to tell you to abandon it or anything like that, or that it's wrong. There's nothing wrong about how someone's going through and making sense of themselves and their relationship with themselves. So if this is how you understand it, then more power to you. But clearly, there is something you recognize in this comment, right? How if you're fully present having tea with Medusa, right, then ask yourself, who is fully present? And don't you think that it's your divinity or higher self needs to be fully present? They're probably fully present, but you're also probably fully present, which means there's 100 and there's 100 and 100. And that's where we question where the 80-20 is even valuable. That's our only point. If this is true, why is this not always true? And why can't you just allow and flow with whatever is or isn't happening? Like, no, your innermost being doesn't necessarily have to be 100% there while you're doing the dishes. But it could be, but maybe not. Right? So why do we have to apply numbers to it? That's our only question, and we just leave it as a rhetorical question. Azazel says, we've had that questions in games too. Like, did you really expect to clear out a level 100 dungeon at level 80? Are we bringing this back to the 80-20 now with this 100 and level 80? So no, he said that question in games too. So if you overstretch yourself, if you take on something that you're not ready for, well, this might be true in a video game, Azazel, but it's very rarely true in life, unless this is why we brought back to that earlier comment you said about doing things consciously, where we consciously choose to go down into the abyss. We have to be sure that we're following our bliss and we're being led into the abyss, that we're not picking some hell out of a hat that we decided that we need to go and explore, that we're not ready for. So this is originally when you had made that comment about we consciously choose to which hell to go down. It's like, well, no, we don't. We shouldn't. We consciously make the decision to go down or not into the hell that's presented us. We consciously make decisions that lead us there, the one that we're meant to go into. But it's not like we're meant to consciously choose and pick out of a hat randomly or whatever, that, like we hear on the news that there's a war in Ukraine. So, oh, hey, that must be the hell that I need to go and experience. We jump on a plane and go and join the Ukrainian militia. Do you know what I mean? Like there are things that we are simply not qualified to do. We are characters in the game, right? We are characters in the game. It's up to our player to decide what level we are going to take on, right? What level dungeon we're going to take on. It's not the character's decision to do that. It's the player's. And the player will never make the mistake that you're describing here. This is a mistake that this is a mistake that only characters make, not our players. It's not to say that our innermost player won't choose a level 100 dungeon when we're level 90 or level 95. It's not to say that we won't be pitted against a task that's difficult, that's challenging, that's going to stretch our limits, but we are never going to be given a challenge or a task that we cannot face, that we cannot overcome. If we do not face it or we do not overcome it, it's because of our own shortcomings. It's because of our own failures, our own failure to take direction, and our own failure to follow the will of our being, our own failure to follow our bliss in the midst of the challenge. We give into our egos, we give into fear, we give into anxiety, we give into panic and anger and frustration and despair and weakness and all the rest of it. But in truth, this situation is at our level, right? And I think that, that's what he's expressing. Did you really expect to clear out a level 100 dungeon at level 80? Just know that's again, this is one of the dangers that we have to be aware of, that if we are not qualified to make these decisions. So don't make them. Let these decisions be made for you and follow them. We're characters in a game. So by following your bliss and exploring your abyss, you always need to have in the back of your mind, what would my innermost do? What does my divine mother, why did my divine mother set this up this way? What am I here to gain out of this? It really is very advantageous to be humble and to pray and ask for help, and remember that I'm not qualified. I'm not qualified. I'm just a character. I'm just an AI NPC. Without my innermost being, I'm an NPC. So forget all of the, grandiosity, the visions of grandeur and delusions of grandeur that we might have. It's called mystic pride. That we're this spiritual or that spiritual, or, oh, we're going into the abyss, we're going on the journey, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. No, I'm going to obey. I'm going to follow my bliss. I'm going to listen. I'm going to be aware and read the signs and the symbols and have one eye in and one eye out. I'm going to be watching and waiting and listening for the directions to come from within, because I am not qualified to defeat this dungeon level. And I'm not qualified to defeat this boss. The best that I can do is extend as much willpower as I can to prevent myself from being overwhelmed and being possessed by whatever demon that I'm fighting in that particular moment. So I have to be in control of myself. That's my job, and not to allow myself to be overrun. But over and above that, I step aside and I get myself out of the way of myself. And I call upon my higher self to work through me to defeat the demons that I need to that I'm facing, or overcome the challenges and overcome the obstacles that I'm facing down in the depths of the dungeon, in the depths of the abyss. Because let's face it, we're not qualified to go into the depths of the subconscious mind armed only with with our rational mind and our own egos. How do we expect to get anywhere? How do we expect to make any progress that way? And yet, this is exactly what the vast majority of so-called spiritual people out there are doing when they talk about their positive thinking and all this other nonsense. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul. They say, oh, well, you just have to avoid negative feelings and negative thoughts and negative emotions, and you power through with positivity. And they don't realize they're just creating a demon. They're just becoming deeper and deeper into Hasna Musin, right? With a split center of gravity. And they're shoring up, and they're giving more power to the false self when they do that. So going into the abyss and facing our demons, facing challenges in the dark night of the soul, this is not as straightforward, just as following your bliss is not as straightforward as it may seem. The enemy, the adversary, is always there to challenge us on every level, in every aspect. And remember, the adversary is our opponent. They're not our enemy. They are there to make us a better chess player. But on the board, their pieces are ruthless. They use subtlety. They use gambits. They use discovered attacks. They use forked attacks. They bluff. They deceive. They use every conceivable possible tactic ever imagined by any chess master in the history of the game, because they are absolutely relentless and ruthless on the board. They are there to defeat us, period. That is how they help us. That is how they make us better. That is how they make us stronger. That's why we have to go down into the abyss, because the abyss is their domain. The abyss is their turf. We are the outsider. We are the xenomorph. We are the alien when we descend into the abyss. We are the unwelcome one. We are outnumbered. We are outgunned. We are Frodo and Sam in Mordor when we go into the abyss. And every piece on that board is 100% geared to our destruction, to our capture, to our enslavement, to our devolution, because that's their divinely ordained purpose. And they are mechanical. They are machines. They're like the Terminator. And it's like Kyle Reese tells Sarah Connor in the original Terminator movie. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't eat. It has no remorse. You can't reason with it. You can't bargain with it. And it will not stop until it fulfills its programming. That's what we're facing down in the abyss. So we cannot go down there armed with a machine mind alone, with our rational mind. We think we're gonna conquer the forces of mechanical nature with this pathetic electrochemical computer. Is that what we think we're going to do? Because a lot of people think that. They think just by thinking positive, they're going to overcome everything, right? They're going to positive think their way into the golden age and into the higher realms and into 5D ascension and all the other nonsense they talk about. It is an absurdity. It would be hilariously laughable if it wasn't so tragic and so lamentable on so many different levels. These people who are so delusional. But that's how clever and insidious the ego mind is. Because these people have not actually faced their abyss. That's why that whole cult of positivity, it's a well-known expression now. People call it spiritual bypassing. That whole cult of positivity, of avoiding all things negative. Well, these people never actually face their demons. They never actually descend into their abyss because they're so concerned with rainbows and unicorns. They're not even crossing the threshold. And the guardian of the threshold, they have it in here already because they've read too many books by Deepak Chopra or whoever whatever new age guru that they read that's was filling their head with this positive thinking crap, or they've read too many self-help books. And 90% of what's in the new age was written by black magicians and awakened demons, right? Or influenced by the Black Lodge. Because even 90% truth can kill. That's the most dangerous teachings in the world, are the ones that are 90% true. And it's not even that they're 90% true and 10% false. They're 90% true and 10% missing. Which means when you're reading it, it resonates as if it's 100% true. Because you don't know what's missing. It's not there. There isn't a lie taking the place of the truth. No. It's just they took 100% of the truth. They cherry picked out 99% of it. And the 10%, which is the final key 10%, they left out. They left the keys to everything out. So while you're reading it, your head is going up and down like this, nodding, yeah, and it resonates 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 and it resonates. All of a sudden, you get to the end of the book. Wow, that's all true, and it was all true. And you're right, it was all true, but it wasn't the whole truth. And the 10% that they left out because A, they didn't know it, or B, they specifically chose to omit that. And either way, you're left with what you're left with. People who are absolutely adamant that they have the answers, that they know the truth, and they're on the downward spiral into hell because of it. Because it's the most dangerous teachings in the world. And this is how clever and insidious and relentless the Black Lodge is. This is what we are facing in the abyss. We are all in the abyss at all times. This humanity is in its abyss, known as the Kali Yuga. Our whole book is about this, exposing these tricks and traps and tactics, all of the deadfalls and the spiked traps and the trash compactors waiting for us when we descend into the abyss. Because we cannot afford to be naive. Yes, we must follow our bliss and we must endure what we must endure. We must carry the burdens that we can carry. And that includes carrying that burden into Mordor like Frodo does. And it's such a heavy burden to carry. But we cannot afford to be naive. And we cannot afford to think that it's going to be a cakewalk. Or that there isn't going to be at every corner another trap that is designed to get us to fail in our mission, in our journey. Because once you start descending in the downward spiral of that bottomless pit, and you start falling precipitously, then it's very, 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 very hard to get out of that free fall, that downward spiral, once you start down that downward spiral. Stuart says, bliss is coming here to the sanctuary of sanity after the weekend's familial tests. It isn't enjoyable having one parent getting stuck in Muggle land and the other on the journey within. It feels like our child becomes the chessboard on which the adversaries engage. Well, that indeed must be a challenge. We can't pretend to know what that's like, having a rift between parents like that and a child caught in the middle. But Well, there's not much more we can say about that. It's as you expressed it, right? But if coming here is a breath of fresh air and a sanctuary, then so be it. We're glad to have you, and we're glad to offer some reprieve from that particular chess game, because that's going to be a very tricky, challenging thing to navigate as you continue forward. Tiffany gave us a prayer hands, and she said, "Sorry for bringing it up. Too long of an experience that led to this. I understand what you said." Oh, she's saying she's regretting bringing up the 80-20 thing, but that's fair. And again, we know that you didn't bring that 80-20 thing up. You didn't make it up arbitrarily. We know that it was an experience that led to it. And we're just saying that there will be experiences that will challenge that and test that. So just be prepared. Like, we can't even begin to list the things that we had to give up in order to be here today. But at the time, those things were absolutely what we needed at the time. But then we moved on, and then we faced something new, and then we had to decide, do I hold on to what got me this far, or do I let it go in favor of what's going to get me to the next level? And this is all we meant about identification and attachment. And we're not saying that it's time for you to abandon anything. We're just saying that there will be a time when you will have to make that decision. It's never good to become attached to anything. Not in here. No matter where it came from or how it got in there. That's all we're saying. Azazel says, no, that is stupidity, really. It's more that the downward spiral gets harder each time. The deeper you go into hell, the harder it's going to be. But the harder it is, that means you're ready for it. You've been prepared for it. This is an important point that Azazel is making here. And we want to make it absolutely clear so that no one is under any misconceptions. Okay? We start wherever we are, and then we start and we go down, and this is roughly how this road goes, right? And then if we draw this line, and remember we said the known and then the unknown. And if down here, every time we go down here, this is our abyss, and at the bottom of this circle, we have some kind of conflict, we have some kind of thing that we have to overcome, right? You'll notice that even though every revolution we're going up a level, right? Like in a video game, you get +1, +1, +1, +1, +1. But to get to the next level, you got to go down, the game never gets easier. It never gets easier. If anything, it only gets harder, in the sense of it becomes more challenging, right? 2 L's in challenging, right? Or just whatever. It becomes more challenging. The challenge goes up, but then the rewards also go up. And as the rewards go up, when we say the rewards, the treasure that we recover, which is our consciousness, And if we have more consciousness, we have more tools, we have more access to the true hero within to deal with ever greater challenges. So it's always proportional. There might be, it's a little bit, it's not one-to-one always perfectly balanced and proportional. Sometimes the challenges are a little bit easier compared to where we are. Sometimes they're a little bit harder compared to where we are. Sometimes they're a lot harder compared to where we are. So in other words, this is a very fluid phenomenon, but the challenges are never beyond, completely beyond where we are. But the game does get harder, objectively harder. Look at the life of Moses. Look at the life of Jesus. Right? The crucifixion was no cakewalk. Moses freeing the Israelites from Egypt and parting the Red Sea and doing all the, that was not exactly easy. That was not exactly easy. Regardless of how much power, divine intervention he had available at his disposal. So we want to be cognizant of this. We never want to lose sight of this. That if we're devoting ourselves and dedicating ourselves to this path, it's not a path of comfort and security. It just isn't. It doesn't mean that we don't have moments of rest and recuperation and rejuvenation. We do. But then each time, if you get complacent and you decide that, okay, I've had enough, I'm going to stay here, well, then your journey is over, effectively. Because every one of these descents, right? Every one of these descents down into the abyss, there's going to be something that's sacrificed, something you have to leave on the table, some form of comfort and security that you have to give up. Or at the very least, temporarily, you set aside. You have to put yourself aside. Get yourself out of the way of yourself, because another way to understand the threshold between the known and the unknown. And as we said, right, we're not qualified to do anything below this line. And what's unknown to us is ourself. So that's why in mythology and in literature and in all these stories and folklore and everything, you have the wise old sage, right? Who we draw here as a shepherd to guide the hero through the underworld and through this aspect of the journey. Because as we said, this is our being. Because the hero, Luke Skywalker, is not qualified to do what he does. And there's no way he could ever do what he does. In the original 1977 Star Wars, the only reason why he was able to destroy the Death Star is because the voice of Obi-Wan comes to him and says, "Use the Force, Luke." It reminds him, tells him to let go. And that's when Luke shuts off his targeting computer. And he puts his faith and trust in the Force. He puts his faith and trust in himself. And he follows the guidance of this still, soft voice speaking to him, of his mentor, his guide. That's the voice of his innermost being, whispering to him, that whispers to all of us. That's what it's unknown That's what's really unknown about this threshold. And the reason why it's unknown is because all of these demons, all of these dragons and demons and monsters that are hoarding all of this treasure for themselves are keeping the kingdom in darkness, shrouded in darkness, that we don't know ourself. But that is the domain of the self. This is the game that the self is here to play. This whole process, the AUM of life, it's not for my benefit. It's not for your benefit. Understand that. We are here in the service of our innermost being. Because if we want to use Lord of the Rings, this fellow, okay, we're going to give him a pointy hat. Okay, that's Gandalf. And the hero is Frodo, who's carrying the ring. But Frodo has another companion. And this other companion is Samwise Gamgee, the physical body, the physical vessel, the one who says, I might not be able to carry it for you, but I can carry you. And he picks up Frodo on his shoulders and starts going up the side of the mountain, the side of the volcano. I'm going to put that back into, take that back into context and say, we have our okay, let's continue on with some chats here before we get too far behind. Stuart laughs out loud and he says, I made an application to join the Ukraine military. I never heard back from them. I got the message. Okay. And Stuart says, priceless. After the events experienced this weekend, the thoughts expressed of those who are spiritually bypassed, I term them dim-witted, as they are not divinely lit up. These comments tonight are priceless to me. Thank God for this and for you all. Piece by piece, the pictures become ever clearer. Tiffany says, a spot on with calling out what's left out of a lot of spiritual movements on this planet. Yeah, a lot. And Leah de Tonacour says, I wish it worked like that. She says, end of the book, but still lost. End of which book? Our book? We'll have to get you to clarify on that. Stuart says, when I refer to my child, it's not just my personal child, it is all our children. As adults, we are responsible for the next generation. Nepotism was expressed so well in Mahabharata. The characters' names escape me just now. The roles showed royal divinity as applying divine law and balance to all children. The corrupt royals favored their own child. And so the battleground of humanity is for our real treasure, our innocence, our children, between the slave masters and the sovereign masters. Benjamin says, I'm just in the moment, just listening. The battleground of humanity is for the souls of all of humanity. And children are, of course, especially susceptible and especially vulnerable, but we are no exception. We are all children of God, right? We're all children of divinity, and God hopes and longs for all of his children to come home. But sadly, that's just not the case. That's not how it works on this planet. This planet is, we are overcome with we are entangled in a tremendous karma that this planet has, and we are all entangled in it. And with each and every passing generation, this humanity just creates more karma for itself in enormous quantities. And we are so overwrought with it that it's highly unlikely that this planet will be able to get out from under it. We're not the worst humanity in the universe. We're not even the worst humanity in our own solar system. But we are on the cusp, if you will, of being beyond help. There comes a point, you may have heard the expression, the singularity, or not the singularity, sorry, the event horizon. It's a term that's applied to black holes. And it is the theoretical point where the gravitational pull of a black hole becomes so intense and so strong that not even light can escape. So that's where the event horizon is that rim of the black hole where on this side you can still see something, and on the other side there's nothing, blackness, because nothing can escape, not even light. The event horizon. And if something falls past the event horizon, it's gone. It can never return. Our humanity has not yet crossed the event horizon, which is why there are so many other humanities and so many beings in the supernal world whose gaze is fixated on this planet right now, and why so many of them have incarnated and are living here human lives. They're not aliens. A lot of people have all kinds of theories about aliens in disguise and all this nonsense. No, 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 no. Members of enlightened humanities have chosen to reincarnate here to help this humanity and also reap the tremendous benefits of facing the intense karma that this humanity is facing in its Kali Yuga. There is so much opportunity for advancement as a being, to increase our level of being, because there's so much suffering, there's so much darkness, there's so much hypnosis and ignorance. And there is so much, again, potential treasure to be reaped from descending into the abyss that this humanity is in. But make no mistake, that abyss is internal. It's in all of us. And so somebody reincarnating on this planet takes on a portion of this planet's karma, because we are all a part of this planet. When we live a life here, we are all part of the body of this planet. And so our karma is um, wound up in and encapsulated in the overarching karma of the planet. There's no escaping it. You don't get to come to this planet and reincarnate on this planet only with your karma. So when you come here, if you came here from another humanity, or you came here from the supernal worlds, you came here from nirvana, or wherever you came from, if you came here to live the path of the bodhisattva, a life of suffering and sacrifice for humanity, well, okay, but you're going to be carrying a heavy burden Like we're carrying a heavy burden. And the burden that we took on, and we're carrying that burden precisely because we need to be down here in the abyss with everybody else. And we needed to know what people were facing in that abyss. And we needed to know that firsthand. And there's no other way to know anything than by direct experience. That is the whole basis for our present book and the whole basis for every book that we write moving forward. And there are many beings that are living here now experiencing the hell, the abyss that this humanity is experiencing in order to be able to help humanity out of this hell. Stuart says, I took it as known that we are all children of God. Okay, fair enough. Leah says, no, the book that she was referring to is Deepak Chopra. Okay, well, no comment. And she says that she has yet to read our book. Okay, fair enough. So each one of us, many times in our life, will go through what we might call the dark night of the soul. And we will face people, circumstances, relationships, or turning points in relationships which test us in every conceivable way. Not all at once, but meaning that at any given point in time, these tests and trials and ordeals that we face in hell, in our abyss, they can be testing one or more aspects of ourselves across a wide spectrum, a wide gambit. We entitled today's talk, Explore Your Bliss, because, or explore your abyss, pardon me, because just like bliss, it is not necessarily so straightforward. We'll give you an example. Someone who suffers depression. Now, we can speak on this point because we suffer depression regularly. And in fact, just a couple weeks ago, last weekend was another rough weekend. January and February is, generally speaking, not a good month for us. We live in Canada. Not a lot of sunshine in the winter, and even when there is, it's so cold we have to bundle up to go outside. So it's not like we can get a lot of sunshine on our skin, right? There's a lot of vitamin D and everything else from it. Today was a beautiful sunny day. It was only -1, so it wasn't even that cold, but still, we had to, we did what we could. We went out for an hour walk in the sun and in the woods and everything else. But depression is not the hell that we need to face. Depression is a symptom. Depression is not a cause. It's not a source. Just as anxiety is a symptom. We can suffer symptoms and confuse the symptom for the source of our suffering. Because if you ask someone who's depressed, saying, oh, you're depressed. Yeah, I feel terrible. I feel awful. Oh, so why is that? Oh, because I'm depressed. I'm suffering depression. And if you ask them, well, why are you depressed? They'll very often snap back at you and say, I don't have to have a reason to be depressed. Don't you understand? People who suffer chronic depression don't need a reason to be depressed. And that's a standing line in psychology, because the neuropsychologists and the physicians and the psychiatrists will all tell you that it's just chemical imbalances in the brain that's causing your depression. But all that is a lie. It is all a lie. It is a convenient, feel good lie that people who are depressed tell themselves so they don't have to take responsibility for the source of their depression. No, there's no chemical imbalance that's causing your depression. The chemical imbalance is caused by what is causing your depression. The chemical imbalance is the intermediary that results in the depression, the symptom. But the source, the cause of the chemical imbalance is not the chemical imbalance itself. But of course, the causes of depression are metaphysical. And what does materialist science know about metaphysical causes of illness or disease or psychological conditions, mental illness? Nothing. They don't want to know. They don't care to know. It's all pseudoscience, they would say. It's all woo. So they prefer their materialist, deterministic, mechanical explanations for everything, because that's how they maintain control. And that's how, because their rational minds work for mechanical nature, they work for the Black Lodge, that's how the Black Lodge can continue causing umpteen suffering to humanity and remain relatively untouched. Such that people are medicating themselves, alleviating the symptom, following the allopathic healthcare model, right? The big pharma model of mental wellness, by just medicating everybody. And we'll just physically, forcefully bring the chemical imbalances back into balance, and then the person will feel better. Oh, we cured your depression. No, you didn't. You treated a symptom. All depression is subconscious anger. It's subconscious rage. But even that can be a bait and switch. Even that can be not deep enough. Why? Because I suffer from depression. I can tell you, my depression is not caused by anger. In fact, if you really meditate on anger, you will discover that anger is very rarely spontaneously just pops up on its own. Anger is like the flamethrower in the hand of the pyromaniac who's hired by another ego. In my case, it's fear. It's fear and the desire to control, because the desire to control and to control outcomes is born of fear. They're two sides of the same coin. It's the same ego, and we've discussed this before, the so-called ruling elite and the Black Lodge that rule the world, etc. And they're trying to bring in all of these systems of control. It's because they're all ruled by fear. They're all possessed by fear. That's why I'm possessed by fear. Why we took on this burden as Attlas to be possessed by that demon, so that we would know our enemy, and that we could look them in the eye and know them better than they know themselves. This is key. This is Sun Tzu, Art of War. Know your enemy, know yourself. And what do we know about our outbursts of anger? We only lose our temper when things don't go our way. We only lose our temper when we're really afraid of something going bad. And if that anger is raging in our subconscious mind, it's draining us of all of our energy, which is the number one sign and symptom of depression, is you have no energy to do anything. You lose all your strength. You lose all your motivation. You don't have any willpower to do anything. It's getting sucked out. It's like it's getting siphoned off from within. That's because rage is having a hissy fit. It's throwing a temper tantrum in your subconscious mind, and it's just draining you. It's just sucking the life out of you, and your very will to live gets sucked out of you. That's depression. And it's anger that's doing that. But what triggered the anger? What caused the anger? What recruited the anger? And this is where we can turn to Yoda's teaching from Empire Strikes Back. When he's training Luke, and he says, fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. And that in us is absolutely the case. Not the hate part necessarily, but certainly the fear turning into anger. Absolutely. So if you're depressed, and believe me, when you're suffering in depression for weeks or months, you're in hell, you're down in the abyss. If you think that, you go on medication or whatever, you're robbing yourself of why that depression exists. That depression is there to invite you to go and seek out its cause, its source, and know yourself. And if you understand that depression is caused by subconscious anger, and something is causing that anger, then you can simply look at your life and say, what am I not happy about? What am I upset about? What do I want to go my way that isn't going my way, that I'm identified to and attached to, that's causing all of this subconscious thing? And then when you notice that you have outbursts of anger, when you have outbursts of emotionality, outbursts of fear, outbursts of, whatever, maybe it's gluttony. Maybe you're depressed because, you're trying to lose weight and you haven't been able to lose weight and you're angry about that. You're frustrated with that. Or maybe it could be any number of emotional causes behind anger. All of this requires an exploration of the very thing that's causing you suffering, in this case, depression. But we could do exactly the same analysis with anxiety, because anxiety it's the same phenomenon, only it's not anger that's raging in the subconscious mind, it's fear. It's fear. If you suffer from fear and you suffer from panic attacks, and you've been possessed by fear, or you have phobias, or you know what it's like to be gripped by fear and paralyzed by fear in the conscious level, and you know what that's like. Well, if you suffer from anxiety, you just use your conscious imagination and meditate on the fact that if you've had the experience of being gripped by fear in the conscious level, and how that what that feels like, and how that the physical symptoms of that and expressions of that, the tension, the stress, and everything, that's literally, you're paralyzed with fear, or you're freaking out, or whatever, right? You're having a panic attack. Imagine that happening in your subconscious mind. And then imagine the ripple effects that would have on the surface. Those are what we call anxiety. Just as the surface level So the constant uneasiness, the constant anxiety, like there's always something, just it's you just can't put your finger on it what, but you're always uneasy, and you're always, well, you're always anxious, like something's about to happen, something's about to happen, something's about to happen. Why? Because that's what's on the surface of, in the subconscious mind, someone's having a panic attack, someone's paralyzed by fear. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Right? In the same way that rage is raging and raging and raging, but on the surface, you get depression. Right? This is not rocket science. It really isn't. It is self-evident. All you got to do is spend like 30 seconds to a couple minutes just contemplating or meditating on this in any reasonable way, and you'll like, yeah, that just kind of makes total sense. Of course, that's what would happen. That's what it would have to be. And if it is that, even if it has to be that, then there must be something triggering that. And if there's something triggering that, well, now you know there's something to explore. There is something to discover. There's something to unearth. Like Indiana Jones, who descends into the tomb, right? Or Tomb Raider, if you like the more modern version, right? Or what's the one on the PlayStation? I can't remember what the different Drake, or what is it, Drake or something? Anyway, I can't remember. But anyway, so Tomb Raider or Indiana Jones, you have to delve into the tomb, delve into the dungeon, right? You're looking for that treasure, but it's buried treasure, and it's guarded by these demons. But if you get stuck on the surface, if you get tricked and fooled by the surface level symptoms or by the simple explanations, and you buy the rational mind's explanation, oh, it's just a chemical imbalance. Here, we'll give you some medication and you'll be fine. Well, are you really in the abyss? Are you really facing what you're facing? Why are we going through the dark night of the soul? And then when you face things like poverty, losing your job, losing your apartment, losing your car, debts, going into bankruptcy, at every turn, your rational mind is going to be wanting to scapegoat and point fingers and say, "Oh, this is the economy. Oh, it's Justin Trudeau, or it's Joe Biden, or it's this damn company, and it's this greed, this and that, and the bad this, and the it's the international bankers, and it's everybody else's fault, right? Everybody else's fault." The fact is, if you are going through the dark night of the soul, if you are down in the abyss, it's an opportunity. That thing happening around you, that experience, those circumstances happening to you are happening. They were orchestrated by your divine mother. For what purpose? For what reason? There's only one way to find out. You have to go explore. You have to explore. If you don't go deeper into the pain, if you don't go deeper into the suffering, if you don't go deeper into the symptoms and the circumstances of the dark night of the soul, you will not get to the vault in which that portion of your soul, your consciousness, is trapped inside. You got to get to the vault, and you got to open the vault. But to do that, you got to get past all the demons and all the bosses guarding that vault. And it seems like a bottomless pit, but that's because if you get to that vault and you free that part of your innermost, that's that little fragment of consciousness which is going to increase your bandwidth to the infinite source of your bliss. This is why bliss and abyss are both relate to something that's bottomless, the bottomless pit. The bottomless hole in your heart that only the infinite source can fill has a complementary bottomless pit that you must go and delve into to unleash and free all the fragments of the infinite source of your being that are trapped in there, that are trapped behind those vaults, that are guarded by those demons and greedily hoarded by those dragons. But you have to explore. You can't be afraid of the pit. You can't be afraid of hell. You can't be afraid of facing your demons. And you can't allow yourself to get identified and bogged down in despair when you are in the dark, when you are in the abyss. This is why we practice self-observation and meditation, and why we practice a healthy separation between observer and observed. And remember that you are in it, but not of it. That I am in this hell, but I am not this hell. This hell has been constructed for my benefit, because somewhere lurking in this labyrinth is the key to my salvation. And we have many keys that we need to find. We have many, in order to unlock these bits and pieces of our consciousness that have been fragmented and buried all throughout the underworld, in all of these various different vaults at the bottom of these various different dungeons, guarded by these various different demons and monsters. Right? It gets really mythological, and it gets really fantasy, really Dungeons and Dragons oriented, because that's where all this stuff comes from. That's what all of this stuff is allegorizing. It's just the psychological work. It's the AUM of life that we need to practice. We need to go through this over and over and over and over again. And the more we do it, the better we get at it. And the more familiar we become, such that this threshold of the known and the unknown that eventually vanishes. And all you are left with is know thyself. All you are left with is the AUM of life. Seek AUM, seek thyself. Because that's what you are doing when you are descending into the abyss and exploring the abyss. That's what you're doing. Every time you unlock one of those vaults, you're discovering, you're unearthing yourself that was trapped within the layers and layers and layers of the labyrinth, within the levels and levels and levels of the dungeon, behind trash mob after trash mob after trash mob of monsters, and behind the final boss was yourself, a bit of yourself. And this is the AUM of life. If we seek self-evident experiential knowledge of this process, this is how you seek yourself. Which is why exploration and discovery in the abyss is exploration and discovery of yourself. The false self, which is enslaving your higher self. But it's yourself, right? Holistically. Know yourself. the person you think you are, and the person you're identified and attached to, and the person you really are, the being. Doesn't matter. It's the same process. You can't know one without the other. So the spiritual bypassing, how if you avoid all the negativity, if you avoid all the pain and suffering, if you avoid the false self, how are you ever going to seek yourself? How are you ever going to know your true self when we've just shown you that the two are intimately connected? In the same way that the bottomless pit of the abyss is directly related to the bottomless wellspring of infinite source, that the two are intimately connected. They're practically the same whole. And that's why abyss and bliss sound so similar, despite the fact that their origins etymologically couldn't be more different. And what anybody will tell you that no, there's no relationship whatsoever, it's just pure coincidence. Is it? After nearly 3 hours of seeing the relationship between follow your bliss and explore the abyss, and seeing all the relationships and the alignments and all the synchronistic, serendipitous alignments between the two phenomenon and how they relate to seeking Aum and seeking yourself and knowing yourself by crossing the threshold from the known to the unknown until the threshold vanishes and all you have is you know thyself. Abyss and bliss, coincidence? Really? Or divine providence? Another beautiful sign, another beautiful breadcrumb that was left for all of humanity on the path through the dark wood toward the light. Because you can't make this stuff up. And this is when you start adding all the pieces of the puzzle together, you want to start talk about mathematics and statistics. This would be astronomically, the odds of all of this coming together just by accident is it's an impossibility. It's an impossibility. But make no mistake, there is no AUM of life. There is no development. There is no growth. There is no heroic journey. There is no triumph without the dark night of the soul, without the descent into the abyss, without facing the monsters and the demons, and without exploring the darkness and unlocking and unearthing the vault, the treasure chest, and opening it and releasing the consciousness that was trapped within. That consciousness that then adds to yourself and to the self-knowledge and the being, the level of being. So you return, and we'll talk about the return and next week, because that's the third part, that's the third act, right? So we'll talk more about that next week, because it's a 3-act play, and we'll talk about the metaphysical science involved in that third aspect. So let's get to your comments quickly here before we want to cover something else very quickly as well. Okay. Benjamin says, speaking of the dark night of the soul, it's about to be the remembering of Jesus, March 24th. We get 2 full moons, and we also remember the sacrifice in context. Absolutely. And we did a short video that we took from last week, because remember, we were talking about intensity, we were talking about sacrifice, we were talking about Jesus endured the crucifixion by following his bliss. So yes, all of that is coming up. So thank you, Benjamin, for that. Our other Benjamin, Benjamin Raphael, says, are you finding it difficult to persuade people to break free from the hypnotic state that the world has put them in? Nowadays, people are more interested in achieving success and gaining power than in following a path of spirituality and truth. This is why we are currently living in a state of chaos, he says, the abyss. Benjamin, we are not here to persuade anyone of anything. And we've given up. We are not, that's not our job. We're here to plant seeds. That's all we're here doing. We are here to show, and the show must go on, right? The show must go on, and we're here to plant seeds. The rest, it's up to them. It's free will. I'm not a used car salesman. I'm not an advertising executive. I'm not a fast talking, charming, ego stroking, I didn't memorize Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, because that's not my job. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to speak to souls. I'm here to speak to innermost beings. And I'm here to plant a seed with people. That's it. Show them the way. They've got to walk it themselves. So, difficult persuading people, it's, you know what? Nothing is difficult when you're not trying to do that. I understand where you're coming from. Is there a lot of resistance? Yes, there is. Is there a lot of defensiveness? Yes, there is. A lot of people who are asleep and they're dreaming and they don't want to be woken up by their dream. That's why people hate the truth, because they prefer their comfortable lies over the truth. And that's, yeah, so there's a lot of that, of course. And that's why, as you point out, this entire planet, this whole humanity is in hell. We're all in the abyss. But that's what a bodhisattva does. Bodhisattva comes, descends into the abyss to free souls trapped there. But he doesn't do it with persuasion. He does it with love, severity, and mercy. And by giving of himself. Right? You give them a gift. You plant a seed with them. That's all you can do. What they do with it, it's up to them. And then we can have no attachments, no identification, and no attachments. Because if I get attached to convincing you or convincing anybody, then I'm no better than anybody else. I'm no better than that. I'm no better than that Wolf of Wall Street character, right? That Leonardo DiCaprio played in Wolf of Wall Street, whatever the guy's name was, right? I'm just a huckster. I'm just another spiritual huckster. I'll be just like another one of those gurus selling books and courses and CDs and whatever, right? But I'm really good at persuading people, right? Well, you're only good at persuading people if you tell them what they want to hear. I'm not here to tell people what they want to hear. I'm here to tell people and show people what they need to hear, and show people what they need to see. But I'm not here to persuade anybody or convince anybody. And that's a big difference. A big difference. Benjamin Ochoa says, I never knew the 2 full moons part in detail till recent. We'll have to look into the 2 full moons related to that, because that's going to be quite the one hell of a time for us, because we don't do well during full moons. Our house guest gets very emboldened, very empowered during full moons. We have to be extra vigilant during full moon, so it's going to be a challenging time. Benjamin Raphael says, I feel like I'm falling into an abyss when I observe the world around me. Instead of people looking inward and getting back to know themselves, they seem to be becoming more and more hypnotized. This is why the elite are willing to implant chips into our brains. They know that we are seeking more illusions. If you read the chapter on VR and VR, AI, and transhumanism in our book, you'll know that the chip implanting thing and the transhumanist thing has been going on for a long time. It's just what mechanical nature does. There's nothing specific to this humanity or this particular time. That it's just that the technology has finally caught up to where the Black Lodge has been for forever. As for feeling like you're falling into an abyss, let's talk about specifically what we mean when we say, explore your abyss. Um, Feeling sad or feeling despair or feeling empathy or disappointment in relation to the suffering of humanity, in relation to where the world is going, or any number of aspects. You want to observe and comprehend why you would feel yourself getting sucked into a despair or an abyss because of that. And if you need to be, then why are you falling into that abyss? There's a reason for it. And it has nothing to do with anybody else. It has to do with you. We're here exploring your abyss, not the world's abyss, not what anybody else is going through. And you feeling sorry for someone or having empathy or sympathy for somebody, it's hard to call that, your abyss. The world is in an abyss and it's in its Kali Yuga. Okay. But do you feel yourself getting sucked into that? Like you yourself are falling into it? Or you're just recognizing it and feeling the empathy and the sadness because of it? So there's a lot of discernment that comes into play here, just like there was when we were talking about bliss. And perhaps, remember when last week when we talked about bliss, we started by asking, what is bliss? Perhaps we could have begun today asking the question, what is abyss? What is the abyss? Your abyss. How do you define it? Because we noted last week that happiness and joy and peace, those are not bliss. Because a dog wagging his tail when you come home from work fills you with joy and happiness, but that dog has nothing to do with your bliss. So, Benjamin, I think here the same thing applies. You feeling sad or you feeling empathy or sympathy or seeing the way the world is and feeling how lamentable it is, I don't think that qualifies as you falling into an abyss. Falling into an abyss is very personal, is very directly related to you and your experience and your psychological state as it relates to a flaw that you yourself have yet to overcome. So just let's again get our terminology straight so that we don't believe that we are in the abyss when really we're not. We're just feeling sad or some other emotion. Stewart says mind bypass surgery by Attlas Alex. No anesthetic, no problem. It's all in the knowing. And he says, at the bottom of the pit, responsibility, the ability to respond. Now I'm in great full bliss. That's a interesting turn of phrase there, how responsibility is an ability to respond. So, yeah, and when you accept responsibility and you recognize and you are able to accept responsibility because you've explored the cause, the source of the psychological hell that you are in, you are now able to respond because you know what it is you are responding to, because you know its source, you know the source of the suffering, you know the source of the psychological hell, the big boss at the bottom of that bottomless pit. In other words, it's not enough just to say, oh, I'm feeling depression, and oh yes, of course I take responsibility for it. That's just paying lip service. Because you saying I'm responsible for my depression, how does that give you an ability to respond? Right? It doesn't. But if you know what is causing the anger that is responsible for the depression, it's okay. I wanted XYZ to happen and it's not happening, and that's making me angry and resentful, and I've internalized that. I've allowed that to sink in into my subconscious mind. So now I know what the source of my depression is. I've taken responsibility for it in a meaningful way. I haven't just paid lip service to it and intellectually said, of course, I'm responsible for my own anxiety or my own depression. Now you know you are responsible for it. You've performed the mind bypass surgery without anesthetic, and you're in the bottom of the pit and you can see the cause of it. And now you can meditate on it. You can observe it. You can comprehend it. Now you can have the real, genuine, practical ability to respond. And this is, as Stuart expresses here, you can be in great full bliss because you are allowing your higher self now to come in and fulfill its role, your divine mother specifically. And we'll get into more of that next week. Leah de Tonacour says, I fight my voices daily. They want me to destroy myself. Medication never works. It only makes me sicker. We're going to offer a radical suggestion, Leah. We don't want you to fight those voices. We want you to listen. Listen to them. Just observe them. Just listen to them. Don't fight them. Don't do what they tell you to do. Don't indulge them, right? Don't bend over backwards and say, oh, okay, sure, I'll do whatever you say. Don't do that either. But don't fight them. Let them have their say. Let the voices in your head get whatever it is they need to get off their chest. Let them get it off their chest. And if you observe what they're saying from a place of not exactly indifference, but from a place of a healthy separation, a healthy distance, just step outside of yourself. And I hear their voices. They're not your voices. They're their voices. Right? You, the observer, Leah, you are the consciousness. What you are listening to those voices with, what you are observing yourself with, is pure consciousness. Remember, we said earlier, and this is an absolute fact. Where was it? Remember here when we said the consciousness that gets freed up, right? We're going to here use this highlighter. Remember the consciousness that gets freed up at the bottom of the dungeon about when we get this some percentage of consciousness from the vault, right? And we said that consciousness belongs to our divine vessel, our monad. right? And we also said, because Joanne asked, and that's over here. Yeah, you go back there. Okay. That's over here. Our being, our Atman, is part of our consciousness, our divine soul, right? They're part of our monad, and our human soul is a part of that. But this is our true self. This is the divine vessel, right? This is who we really are. This is who Leah really is, not the character of Leah in the game, but the player. Which means the voices are not your voices. Those are the voices of one or more entities that you face. So to visualize that, to conceptualize that, okay, we're going to assume that occasionally you might wear a skirt, right? So there's Leia, okay? You have your okay, your heart and your third eye, your pineal gland. This is the heart is the seat of your soul, your Atman, your being, and your divine mother here in your heart. And you see with your third eye, your consciousness. And you, Leia, will have a voice. You have a voice. And when you speak from your heart, you speak with the voice of that higher self. Every other voice that you experience is not your voice. Okay? They're the voice of egos. They're the voices of one or more entities. Which means you can observe them from this place, with this faculty, from this source, and not identify with any of them. You have voices, or no, sorry, that's not even a good way to say it. You have a voice. You hear voices. And these voices probably have some emotions or whatever connected to them. To just observe them. Just recognize that, they are not you. You are not them. You don't have to identify nor become attached to them in any way. And recognize that if you don't identify with them, we're not saying to ignore them, but you don't have to indulge them. You don't have to answer them, and you certainly don't have to act on what they tell you to do. In many ways, it would be like any type of famous person who receives fan letter or hate mail. Fan mail or hate mail, it doesn't matter. You know how many messages that famous people or people like Elon Musk or whatever must receive every day? People telling them, "Oh, you should do this and you should do that and do this and do that and do that." Does Elon Musk fight with these people? So if we're talking about voices that are, we're going to scroll down here. Um, and Stuart said something. Okay, so Leah said, okay, we're gonna. There's another thing, Leah, that if this is relates directly to depression, we have a let us hang on. Where did it go? Not okay here. Okay, this is on Facebook. Um, this is a post when this is our former when we had Atlas information that we got locked out of. We won't go over that story again, but this was our former page. It was called Atlas Information. You can read this at your own leisure. We're going to give you the link right now here in the chat. Everyone should be familiar with this who's been around the live stream for a while, because we end up sharing this on a regular basis, Leia. Oh, here's the okay. So it's, I don't know, it's probably, it might be easier for you to cut and paste it out of the chat, or if you go to Atlas Information. I don't know if you search Atlas Information and search for Lighthouse. I don't know if this will come up, but you know, if you can't find it or can't access it for some bizarre reason, get in touch with us on Facebook Messenger or send us an email through our website or something. We'll get it to you one way or another. We'll email it to you if you have to. This is our approach to dealing with depression. And in a nutshell, it's shining, it's this image, right? Of being the a boat lost at sea in the middle of the storm. Do you really want to be in the boat, or do you want to be in the lighthouse? And when you comprehend the relationship, why the lighthouse is there and what it's for, and when you comprehend that the lighthouse shines a light into the darkness in the middle of the storm, and it's the lighthouse that guides that boat through the stormy sea so it doesn't crash on the rocks. When you realize that in you, the lighthouse is your consciousness, because that's the light that shines, that illuminates something. Every time you look, every time you pay attention to something, you are shining the light of consciousness on it, which means you, Leah, are in the lighthouse. You are not in the boat. And when you remember that and practice that and internalize that and practice that, like we were showing a moment ago here, you see, this is this configuration. If we draw an island here and we draw a very crude shape, you see, Leah, you are the lighthouse, and these are the storm clouds, and they're shooting lightning, and they're blowing wind, and they're desperately trying to get this boat, this ship, with this person in the water, trying to get them to crash on the rocks. You said it yourself. They're trying to get you to destroy yourself. They're trying to get this boat to sink. The only hope that the captain of this boat, the captain of this ship has, is the light that shines from the lighthouse. And the lighthouse is always on solid ground. Remember that. You are the lighthouse. You are not in the boat. You have a boat that you have to help guide into shore through the rough seas and past the dangerous rocks. But you will always be in the lighthouse. Leah says, "Thank you. That helps." Well, we hope so, because this is how we deal with depression. We have some pretty severe depression, and this is what helps get us through the really dark, and stormy nights, the really rough and stormy seas. All right. Where were we? Okay. Stuart says, rhymes, rhythm, and reasons dance the aum in all seasons. Rhymes, rhythm, and reasons dance the aum in all seasons. Okay. And Stuart says, belly laughing at the show must go aum. But it's true. It's true. The show must go aum. And Benjamin says, I guess it helps me to remember the abyss symbolically is our false self, or throwing in our own concepts unconsciously and creating angst. But remember what we said, it's you descend into the false self so you can liberate yourself. And yourself set up this whole game in the first place. So it's just know thyself. Seek aum, seek yourself. So yes, the abyss is caused by your false self. The dungeons, the monsters, they're there. They're the false self. They're part of the false self. But remember, your true self is hidden away in a vault, in a treasure chest, in a treasure trove, behind all of that. So you got to get through all of that in order to reach your true self, which is imprisoned and enslaved behind all of that. That's the whole process and the whole game. So yes, the abyss is the false self, but it's in the same way that a walnut, yes, it is the shell, but inside, behind that shell, is something really valuable. Stuart says, I am responsible for my irresponsibility, and that gave cause to rage bordering on wrath that was hidden behind lifelong depression. Hallelujah, brother. Well, there you have it. Joanne says, thank you. Today has been another deep dive and so many notes. We'll be watching this again. There's just so much to take in. Thank you, Attlas, for a wonderful teaching and laying out the truth so directly. Giving thanks. You're welcome. You're welcome. And Stuart says, he says, being Atman, Batman. You know what? That's not an accident, right? That's not an accident. And Leah says, I love the way you put that, Stuart. Then we had our links to the lighthouse, which might as well leave up for. And then Benjamin says, and as some lyrics go, quote, if you're lost at sea, I will find you. I will find you. If you're lost at sea, I will find you. That's Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace. I was lost, but now I'm found. That poem was written by a sailor lost at sea. And he wrote Amazing Grace. I was lost, but now I'm found. He wrote those lyrics. He wrote while he was lost at sea. He was a sailor in the middle of a storm. And that's when Amazing Grace came to him. And who hasn't been moved to tears by Amazing Grace at a funeral or at some other somber heartfelt event? It's an anthem for mourning now. and it's an anthem for struggle, an anthem for enduring struggles and suffering. And Stewart says the vault is not always below. In gymnastics, one may vault up and over with spectacular style. And he says, amazing grace, or a crumpled heap. Okay, that's a different kind of vault. Okay, we're gonna call you on that one, Stuart. That's a different kind of vault. And yeah, of course, you can fall flat on your face when you try to vault over the pommel horse or whatever the hell those things are called. But we're talking about the other kind of vault. And again, Leah said thank you for the lighthouse. Okay. We have to explore the nature and the dark corners of our abyss. And this is related to directly related to, you know, what people call shadow work. And we'll get deeper into next week into the true nature of all of this and the upward swing. Because we've had follow your bliss, right? And now we've descended into the abyss and we've explored our the abyss, and we know that we have to overcome and defeat, and we have to keep digging and digging and digging until we unearth the real vault that's trapping our consciousness, the real thing that's behind all of the layers and layers and layers and levels of the onion that we have to peel back, because we recognize in the examples of depression and anxiety, these are the best examples, because number one, so many people suffer from it, and number two, so many people just choose to medicate themselves. Number three, they never have any realization that they are the cause of their own depression, because everybody keeps hammering into their head that, oh no, you can't blame people, you can't, what's the word, they would say shame them. They would call, you know, like fat shaming. You're not allowed to tell people that they're responsible for their own obesity, because that's fat shaming, right? You're not allowed to say that the woman who dressed up like a whore and went by herself into a bar filled with drunken, horny men, and then she got date raped by one of them. You can't say that she was stupid and she put herself into a dangerous situation. No, because now we're shaming and we're blaming the victim. We're victim blaming, right? Or not, I'm not victim blaming. It's still the responsibility of those who took advantage of her. They should never have done that. But if someone was so foolish to put themselves in that situation, they have some responsibility that they put themselves in that situation. And it's stupid and naive to think that I should be able to walk around anywhere in the world dressed however I want. It's called prudence. It's called practicality. It's called common sense, right? It's like you don't go into Lebanon or East Palestine or Iran wearing a I love Jews and all Arabs die t-shirt. You know what I mean? You just don't do it. And if you do it and you get shot in the head or you get kidnapped by Hezbollah and held for ransom, and you can say, "Oh, but I'm a victim. I'm a victim." Yeah, but you were an idiot. You were an idiot. You wore a "I love Jews and all Arabs die" shirt in the middle of downtown Iran. What did you think was going to happen? So, you know, responsibility comes in many forms. And we live in a world where the victim is held on high on a pedestal, and that becoming a victim is the most powerful calling card to control and manipulate everybody else. And that if you are a victim, somehow you get a pass, get out of jail free card, pass go, collect $200, right? It's all entitlement. It's like why we have this entire generation of weaklings who haven't worked a day in their life. They don't know any suffering, anything else. Everybody got a trophy for participating. It's all part and parcel with the same passive aggressive victim mentality thing, where being a victim is power. And as soon as you raise the word responsibility, oh no, that threatens my power. So now I've got to gaslight you and say that you're victim shaming and victim blaming. How dare you? Because what that person is really saying is, my victim status gives me power. It gives me social status. How dare you threaten my social status and the source of my power? How dare you question the legitimacy of my victimhood? That was a bit of a rant, but there you have it. There it is. Stuart says, an electric volt. An electric volt. We're not sure what you said that. And he says, the victim and the virtue signaler could be the next book title. Nah, we've covered it. We've covered it. We have an entire chapter on it in our book. We don't need to. We don't need to make a separate book on this. No one's going to read it anyway. The people who need to read it will not read it. Let's put it that way. So no, we've done that. We've been there. We've done that. We've covered it. It's in what in hell is with us. It's part of the Great Awakening. We got to move on to other things now. Namely, we got to tackle fear. That's the next big one that we got to. That's the next book that we have to put out. That's going to be relevant to, let's face it, the vast majority of people on this planet, including all of the elite, because we're going to point that out. We're going to make it clear to everyone and everything what precisely rules this humanity. If the whole COVID fiasco wasn't evidence enough, right? The whole thing was a referendum on fear. So if there was ever any doubt, just go back and look at what was happening from 2019 to 2022. So we're at the 3.5 hour mark. Does anybody have any questions or comments at this time? We think we've probably done fair good justice to the topic at hand. And Tiffany says, scary shite. Oh, sorry, Tiffany, we missed this one. The elite are the most fearful, to the brutal point. Yeah, it's scary shite. Because and you know they're the most fearful because they're the most obsessed with control. They're the most control obsessed, control freaks. And every control freak is ruled by fear. And she says, fabulous topic today. Thank you. You're welcome, Tiffany. As we said, this is the second part in a 3-part series that began last week with bliss. We didn't know we were doing a series. We never know what we're doing when we're doing it. We are always in the moment, right? I just serve. I just do what I'm, we do what we're told. And so it just became clear that if we began with bliss last week, we would have to follow it through. So next week, we are going to be talking about the return. And we're going to come up with a better title for that than that, but it's really the return. So we're still following our bliss, but now we're exiting the abyss. We are returning home. We're coming home. And what all of that looks like, not just from the Joseph Campbell point of view, but from the practical esoteric point of view. And what does it take? What are some of the practical metaphysical things that we can do to accomplish that? Well, so we'll be going over that in detail next week. And she says, Tiffany says, yep, caught the first in the series. Looking forward to the third. Well, we look forward to having you. And Stuart says, the more a person gains materially, the more they perceive they have to lose. And thus, the fear, control, and greed amplify has been my observation. It's an interesting thought. And perhaps we will, well, you know what? Let's address it now as briefly as we can. What drives someone to seek those material gains in the first place? That's all we need to say, really, because it's self-evident. All you got to do is watch that show Hoarders. Watch one episode of Hoarders. No, okay, so that's the what. That's the what, Stuart. More. More is not a why. On the mind that seeks more, that's a what. That's not a why. That's a what. Why does it seek more? Watch one episode of Hoarders. You can find it on YouTube. And then ask yourself, why does a squirrel hoard nuts for the winter? What is it that drives a primitive, the most primal primitive hoarding instinct? And what drives people to do that? And again, watch an episode or two of Hoarders. You can get it on YouTube for free, and it'll become crystal clear. Nothing that we experience in life is caused by the outside world. You know when they say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely? It's not true. It's not true. We can only be corrupted from within. That's a fact. That's a fact. What made you seek that power in the first place? What made you seek to gain that absolute power in the first place? Is exactly the quote unquote what corrupts you, not the power. It's just that what wanted the power finally has it, so that now it can act in the corrupt way that it always wanted to, because now it can. But the thing that's tempted by the great power was always there. It was always there. And the power, we attract that power. It's called the law of attraction. We attract not what we want, we attract what we are. But if what we are is a demon of corruption, and what we want is tremendous power, and we think we're attracting what we want, no. We're attracting what we are. And if we happen upon tremendous wealth and material gain and power and everything, and it just happens that we never wanted it, it just shows up for some bizarre reason, but right away we are tested and we are tempted. And that's where the cliche, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, that's where it comes from. Because elements within us that might be dormant and sleeping and saying, well, I've got nothing to work with, so I'm just going to sit down here and bide my time, blah, blah, blah. I'm twiddling my thumbs. I don't know. And all of a sudden, boom, this huge, enormous wealth and power. All of a sudden, these dormant forces with us awaken. The demons come to life because now they've got something to work with, something that whet their appetite. The temptation is there. You can be a monk in a monastery, right? No problem. But then one day the abbot of the monastery says, we received a package from overseas, and you have to go down into the city to pick it up from the post office. and you go on this long journey down through the the mountains, and first the mountain villages, and then the lowland villages and the farm whatever, and then you get into the bigger city, and all of a sudden you walk by a brothel, and hanging off the railing of the and out of the windows of the brothel are half naked promiscuous women. All of a sudden, temptation, right? But the temptation is not coming from outside of you. It's just that when you're up in the mountains in the monastery, surrounded by all those other monks, there's no the lust is dormant. There's nothing titillating it. There's no catalyst for it to awaken it and feel the the desire. There's nothing to desire. It's always within us. The responsibility, it's our responsibility. And all of that stuff in the game world, it's all just a temptation. It's all just a test. It's all just another test. It's another part of the game. But the adversary is within. There's no adversary out there. The adversary is always within. Which is, by the way, one of the reasons why Master Samael said that he doesn't advise people cloister themselves off from the world. Like the yogis, the ascetic yogis who go up on mountaintops and they cut themselves off from the world. And then legends grow in the villages below about the great yogi enlightened master on top of the mountain. Yeah, you know what? And pilgrims go up to visit him and up to get advice and sage advice, and he sits there and illuminates on the on the nature of the universe and blah 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 blah. No, 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 no. Have that enlightened yogi master come down from his perch on the mountaintop. Have him come down here with us, down here in the mire, down here in the shit, down here in the abyss, as Benjamin was saying earlier. Have him come down and live and walk a couple days in our shoes. Let's see how much of an enlightened master he really is. Let's see how he reacts to all the crap that we deal with every day. Then his true colors will reveal themselves. Because anybody can be an enlightened master all alone on the top of a mountain, not tested, not challenged, with all their egos perfectly intact and laying dormant because there was nothing to stimulate them and get them coming to the surface. So they're all there in the subconscious mind, laying dormant like so many deadly bacteria, frozen in an iceberg or something, just waiting to be melted and come back to life, right? That's why Master Samael says we need the gymnasium of life. We need to be tested. We need the people who piss us off, that frustrate us, that challenge us, that because we need that, because we need them to trigger us so we see those demons coming to the surface. We need that. How else are we going to know our adversary? How else are we going to do everything that we talked about today? Going deep down into the abyss. How can we do that? And that's what's so powerful about the Kali Yuga. That's what's so powerful about the age that we are in. That's what's so powerful about the great awakening of humanity that we write about in our book. Because all of this is an opportunity for us to learn and grow. Because, as Benjamin pointed out, we're all in the abyss. We're all in hell. Humanity is, collectively. It's a tremendous opportunity. If only we have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and the courage to abandon our comfort and security, cross the threshold, and go deeper and into and to explore the causes and sources of that psychological hell, the real foundations of that abyss, and what's lurking, what's hidden away, what's squirreled away in the vaults in the deepest, darkest vaults that have yet to be unearthed, yet to be discovered, that only the hero who goes on that journey, that goes on that mission down into the abyss, can set it free to restore the kingdom back into balance. And we'll talk about that last part, that last act, next week. Tiffany says, I'm so glad I don't get tempted or full of lust over bodies. That one took a minute, but the triumph was and is sweet. And, well, for women, it's very much not bodies that they get tempted over. It's very much more of a mental and emotional temptation. So for men, it's more bodies, it's more physical and visceral. But for women, it's more mental and emotional. So, but yeah, but getting over the temptation of lust is a big one. It's a big one for everyone. Stuart says, walk the walk and talk the talk in all environments. There you go. But if you can't be a master in hell, if you cannot be chaste in the middle of a brothel, then you are not chaste. If you cannot be peaceful and calm in the middle of a bar fight, then you're not at peace and you're not calm. Does anyone have any more questions or comments? What we will attempt, you may have noticed or you may have seen, we are going to start trying to take segments from our live streams and editing them into smaller chunks, 5-10 minute, maybe 15-minute chunks, and putting them on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and so on. So we're going to be trying to doing more these like shorts, these like literally 60-second clips. We're also working on the next video in our series on VR, AI, and transhumanism from the book. So we're working on that as well. That's taking a little bit longer, but hopefully we'll have at least that video out, plus maybe we don't know how many clips we're going to get from this live stream, but hopefully we can get at least 2. And then we're going to try to keep doing that moving forward. We also have memes to update and all kinds of, we got a lot of work to do, and we're trying to do our best as we move forward to get this stuff going. But we also have to start working on our next book, and on and on and on and on it goes. So lots of stuff to look forward to keep an eye out for. And we hope that if you like anything we put out, we hope that you'll share it and like it and do all that good stuff, because it helps with the algorithm, but it also helps, exposing it to other people and so on and so forth. We were on a live stream, or not a live stream. We were recording a podcast with someone on Friday, and it's the Soul something podcast. It's we posted it on our Facebook. It's the Soul something or other. Anyway, when it goes live, we'll let you know. The Soul Shine podcast. That's what it was. And so it seemed to go fairly well. We'll see how it turns out, and you guys can be the judge when it goes live. And when it does go live, we'll let you know where you can watch it and so on. Stuart says, a master fool at all times. And Tiffany says, I've noticed you were chunking down on these a bit. Good job. Thanks. We hope you found them valuable. And Benjamin says, or would you want all the riches in the world in exchange for that part of your consciousness that's aware that you are rich? 100% I'll choose my consciousness. 100% I'll choose my consciousness, and it's hell for that matter. Ha ha. Okay. Or would you want all the riches in the world in exchange for that part of you, in exchange for that part of your consciousness that's aware that you're rich? 100% I'll choose my consciousness, and it's hell for that matter. Okay. Does anybody have anything else to add or ask? Because then if not, we will call it a day. We'll thank you as always for being here today. Tiffany says, peace, everyone. Until next time. Thanks for joining us, Tiffany. Always a pleasure to have you here. Always a pleasure to have everyone here. So, again, have a good week. Keep an eye out for some of the stuff that we'll be hopefully putting out. Maybe not tomorrow, but hopefully Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We'll see how things go. Stuart says, peace with all. All right, then. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great week. We hope to see you again next week for part 3 of this series. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and inferential peace.